In this lesson, we'll learn how we can create objects that don't necessarily fit onto one of our perspective planes. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we learned how to use automatic plane positioning to move our planes very quickly and temporarily over so we can create other objects. So we've kind of worked up to a point now with our skyscraper that we're ready to start creating some of the faces on these objects that don't really fit flush with either one of our three planes here. Now if we come back over to our orthographic drawing, we're actually going to go ahead and start with this triangular piece right here, and this edge of it that fits right along here. So that's actually going to be this piece right here that I've drawn up, and I'll go ahead and hold down Alt and make a copy of that. And let's just drag that over here into position. So the first thing we need to do is figure out how we need to place this into perspective to start with. So I think that if we place it on this right grid plane, we'll at least get part of this shape in the right position. So let's go ahead and grab our perspective selection tool and snap that in where the bottom left corner of this shape sits right on our origin. And again, we can double check that by coming up here, selecting that spot on our reference point, and then checking the XY coordinates. So great, that looks pretty good. So at this point, we need to figure out a way to get the top part of this shape to sit in a perfect position across this gap at the top of our triangle. And to do this is actually going to require a few steps, but follow along. We'll do this a few times. First thing I'm going to go ahead and do is grab my direct selection tool with the keyboard shortcut A. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this path segment right here on the right side of this shape. And we've basically just selected the path between these two anchor points. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I'll hit my backspace key, and in doing that we've opened this path up. It's no longer a closed path. Now I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process for the other vertical path here, the one that sits right along this axis right here. So we'll go ahead and delete that, and what we're left with now is the path that was at the top of the shape here and the path at the bottom that's actually in a really good spot right now. So really what we need to focus on is getting this one path moved back to here. And I tell you what, if we deselect that here and then switch to our perspective selection tool, I'll draw a marquee around it so we just have this path selected. And if you remember in previous lessons, we learned how to create perpendicular movement by holding the keyboard shortcut 5. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and hold 5, and we're going to move that back. Now we can actually get it pretty close, but we want this to be in exactly the right position here. So I want to get it pretty close, and then we're going to zoom in and work with our transform panel a little bit here. And you can see I've got it pretty close, but there is a little bit of a gap. So now the first thing we need to do is, you may be thinking, match up the X and Y coordinates for these points, these anchor points, with these tips of our triangle. Well, yes and no. Yes, we need to do that, but no, that's not the first thing we need to do. The first thing we need to do is check and see which perspective plane each of these objects lives on. Remember, this object right here lives on our right perspective plane. Well, these objects right here, these live on the left perspective plane. So we need to actually figure out a way to move this object over so we can read the coordinates as they're living on the same plane. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on this path, and I'm going to choose perspective. And then there's this release with perspective option right here. Now we can also access this option through our object menu and under perspective, and then release with perspective. So let's go ahead and select that here, and that's going to break the relationship between this path and this right grid perspective plane. So now that we've done that, we can come over and select the left grid perspective plane, right click on our path again, and now there's a new option available to us. There is the Attach to Active Plane option. So let's go ahead and select that, and we'll attach that to the left perspective grid. Staying with me so far? Well, don't worry, we'll actually do this one more time in this lesson. So I tell you what, now we need to figure out the X and Y coordinates here. So looking at this object here, we'll click on that and take a look at those coordinates up here. Alright, so we can see here the X coordinate is minus 86.93. Let me copy that. Let's come over here and click on our path and our path only, and we'll come over and select that same anchor point, and let's paste in that value and hit enter. Alright, so we've just matched that path up with the exact top of those two triangles. So that's exactly what we wanted to do. So let's go ahead and select our path now, and then switch to our pen tool with the keyboard shortcut P, and we're going to recreate this object simply by clicking on this anchor point here when we have that little slash next to our pen tool. It's going to extend this path, And we'll come down here and we'll next click on one of the anchor points for this path that lives at the bottom. And you see we get that little chain link next to our pen tool. That means we're on the right anchor point. Alright, so we've actually created a third side for this shape. So we've still got an open path, and we probably want to go ahead and close that off. We could try and use our pen tool to do that, but a really easy way to do that is just to hit Control J on your keyboard, which will actually join that path together. Or you can come up to Object, choose Path, and then Join right there. And you can see here, based on that little blue line, that we've actually closed this path off, and thus finished creating the top face of this triangle that, you know, while it doesn't appear to live on either one of these perspective planes, we know that it is assigned to this left perspective grid. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and repeat this process here for our next face, this face of our middle protrusion. So we'll come over here and let's go ahead and select this piece right here. We'll make a copy of that and bring it on over onto our artboard. Alright, we'll zoom in really nice and tight here. And I'm going to go ahead and switch to my perspective selection tool, and we're going to go ahead and line this up. But before we do, we're going to actually use our automatic plane positioning to move that right grid. We'll need to select that first. Move our right perspective grid to a plane that is matching with this shape right here. So let's go ahead and hold Shift there. Move that on over, and now we can go ahead and bring this shape into perspective. Now it's going to try and snap to our perspective grid here, so we might not be able to get that exactly lined up. So let's just go ahead and let it snap to the grid, and then we can use our transform panel to reposition it. So what we'll need to do is come down here, and let's just go ahead and deselect our object for now, and we'll go ahead and click on this face right here. Let's see if we can't figure out what the actual coordinates of this shape are. So that tooltip right there is saying the y coordinates are 280, 15. Let's go ahead and select this shape and see if we can't move that down to 280, 15. That seems like an awful big jump, but we'll try it out. And yeah, that looks like it's a little too far. Something wasn't quite right about that. So let's go ahead and deselect that, zoom out a little bit, make sure everything looks good on our grid. And let's go ahead and select. Yeah, it looks like we have the bottom left-hand corner selected. Let's go ahead and select that top left-hand corner. There's our true y coordinate is 295.6. We'll copy that. And let's go ahead and close that up and select this object. Select that bottom left-hand corner and paste in our destination. So there we go. We get those two objects to snap together. Now we're ready to come up here and handle this top part. So if you remember, according to the last shape, the first thing we did was come in and actually delete the sides of our shape. So let's come in here and select the path segment, hit backspace there. We'll select this segment and hit backspace there. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and bring these to the front by hitting Control Shift close bracket. Make sure we're easily able to reconnect them when we need to. And I want to go ahead and deselect those and use my perspective selection tool to draw a marquee around this one here. And we'll hold down 5 to use to be able to move that back perpendicular. And we'll get that pretty close here. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and move this over to this left grid plane. So we'll go ahead and right click and release it. And select the left grid plane and right click and attach to active plane. So we've attached that to the same plane that these live on here, these triangle pieces anyways. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and mouse over and see what the coordinate is of that. We've got an x coordinate of minus 159.06, and let's see here. The x coordinate of our path is actually pretty close, so let's go ahead and match those up. I believe we had 159.06 here. So we'll go ahead and just change this value here, moving that back just a little bit further, and that's in the proper position. So we're ready to go ahead and grab our pen tool and recreate this shape. Come down here and link that up to the path at the bottom here, and I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and just reselect this entire shape and hit Control J. Alright, so we've created the top of our second protrusion here, and it is in the right position here. I'm going to do this several more times. I'll go ahead and do it one more time really quickly for you in this lesson just to create this last shape, but we've got plenty of other opportunities for the main body here in the next lesson. So let's come over here one more time. Doing this very quickly now. We'll go ahead and grab this shape and copy it. Use our automatic plane positioning to position that right plane to this shape right here. There we go. And we'll go ahead and bring this into perspective. Alright, so that's pretty close. We'll go ahead and check the values and line that up just right. So let's go in here and check the top left corner here. And we've got a Y value of 469.25. Let's go ahead and select this piece now. The bottom left corner. Fairly close. We'll just paste that value in and match those two shapes up. Alright, so let's go ahead and get rid of these side path segments. Now it's trying to select the mask around this other shape, so I need to go ahead and bring this forward to the front. Go ahead and do that here so we can select that segment. And now we're ready to go ahead and move that back perpendicular. So we'll go ahead and deselect that, grab that with the marquee selection, and let's go ahead and deselect these two shapes by holding down Shift. I tell you that one's being persistent, so let's just go ahead and work till we get just that path selected here. So we'll go ahead and hold down our 5 key now. Move that on back. We can get pretty close on this one. Let's go ahead and get it perfect. So we'll go ahead and again release the perspective, select our left grid, and then reattach the perspective. Alright, so we'll deselect that here, and let's come in here. And I tell you what, we've got just a little bit of a problem. Let me just explain this to you because I'll fix this in the project files. So when you're working through this, you can actually create this shape right here using the same technique. But what I've done here is I've got a mask. And inside this mask, we've got a shape here that has this triangle to the top of it. You can kind of see the outline of it if I mouse over it. So this shape actually exists. So there's not a true anchor point right here for me to take the coordinates off of. So for this one, for right now, let's just go ahead and get this as close as we possibly can using our eye. Alright, so that looks pretty close. We'll go ahead and run with that. And let's go ahead and recreate the shape. And Control J. And alright, we've created those 3 faces for our protrusions on our skyscraper, and we're ready to kind of work our way over into the middle here. So in the next lesson, we'll pick up where we're leaving off here, and we'll continue to build this skyscraper.